On behalf of MC Squared, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Grade 8 PARCC Math Assessment Zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll go straight over to the website. So remember, to get there, we're going to come up here to this bar that has the test prep site. It is the PARCC Pearson website. Before I get started, I want to remind people that this handout will have the opportunities for practice specific to Grade 8 items. Okay, so here we are at the site that was listed at the top of the handout. We come over here at the top bar to test preparation. And we're going to come down here. You'll notice the bottom links here, tutorials and practice tests, are two areas that you will use a lot. So I'm going to hit over here to tutorials, and I'll scroll down. Your test nav tutorial will give you information about the features across the top, the actual navigation, back, forward buttons, opening a calculator, the review function, which we'll go over those. So students can go over these alone without the content or the other features of the test. But if you are doing this, the recommendation is that you do the whole tutorial, which is down below here, with all your students, and then you can highlight these features at the same time that you're doing the online tutorial. I do want to call attention to the right-hand side, another tutorial for the equation editor and extra practice with the equation editor. The equation editor guide is a narrative or text format of kind of instructions for using the equation editor. I'm going to go down here to the online tutorial. So you'll notice that there's 4 different grade bands of tutorials. There's a 3-5, a 6-7, an 8, and a high school tutorial. These tutorials are specific to grade band. Inside the tutorial now, it's similar to the tutorial for the other grade bands in that there's multiple choice items. There's some narrative here that they can read, and then they come across over here and find out that multiple choice items are going to be a circle. They only allow one response. Okay, they can choose the response here. If they want to change the response, they can change it. If they want to take it off, they have to come and pick another circle down. Okay, the multiple select for the 8th grade test, in contrast to the elementary especially, the elementary will say select 3 correct answers or select 4. At the 8th grade, it just says select each correct answer, and students may find that there's only one correct answer. The instruction will tell you select each answer. What I also would like to call to your attention is that in multiple select questions, the answer dial or response dial is square, as opposed to the circle that is a multiple choice item. So in this case, select each correct answer. To deselect an answer choice, click on the deselect button, click it, and it takes it off. Notice I got a little pop-up up here. It says you are permitted only 2 responses for this question. I'm going to say that this is true. So when I clicked the 3rd one, I got an error message. I don't know if you noticed it up there. You're permitted a maximum of 2 responses. Now, when I tried this on the actual test questions, I didn't get that pop-up. Okay, I'm going to move forward. Okay, there's just an opportunity for them to practice the multiple choice, then practice multiple select. Okay, another opportunity to practice multiple select. Okay, drag and drop, which is pretty intuitive for students, especially those who have used other test formats or are gamers. The formatting of where these spaces are was a little confusing. So it wanted to know 1/2⁶. So I know that that's probably a 2 to the -3, and that's actually a multiplication symbol. In the equation editor for this grade level, there's a little arrow key here. This little arrow key, if they press it, they get extra functions, like a relational symbols, less than, greater than, a plus or minus sign, a fraction bar. Sometimes the question will say x equals, and then it'll show the box. They'll be filling in information into the box. It's a very basic editor that only allows your answer in numbers and any of these symbols. The longer editor, which is the open response editor, allows math and text from your keyboard. They need to be able to type in numbers, symbols, and words. Now over here to the right, if I click that off, kids need to know that if they see a question that looks like this, that in order to get the functions that they might need to explain their answer, that they need to click here. Math symbols will give them all of these math symbols. If they want to close it, they click it. The relation symbols will come up here, similar, not equal to, etc., less than, greater than. Okay, if they close that one, they can also have geometry symbols, array, a line, parallel, perpendicular, measure of an angle, or naming an angle, the little triangle symbol, parallelogram, a circle symbol. In order to kind of shorthand the naming of some of these things, they can use these geometry symbols. If you want more practice with just these two kinds of editors, you can go here to this tutorial site. Here's an opportunity for them to add, and it says answer only. So when they put their answer, they're going to put their answer right into that. I just want to call your attention to the fraction feature. So if the answer is a fraction and you put, for example, 2/3, okay, and if you had a reason to continue the expression and put a plus sign, please notice that the plus sign continues in the denominator. I don't want that plus sign in the denominator, so I'm going to come over here. I have an undo function or a feature, a redo feature, and then I have a clear all feature. So I'm going to undo it. Okay. If I want that plus sign to appear other than in that denominator, I have to hit the right arrow key on my keyboard. So the right arrow key will get me to another operator in there. So in this case, it would have only wanted one answer. So here is a question that's multiple select. And so if I read the question says that I've got the lines represented by each equation have the same slope. So obviously the same slope means there's going to be infinitely many solutions. So lo and behold, here's a multiple select that has only one answer. Okay, and then here's an opportunity to answer. So in my explanation over here, say that I wanted to put a mixed number in. I do not need to worry about putting a plus sign in because a mixed number format won't allow a value added in the denominator. So let's suppose that we have a radical symbol, okay? And just for the sake of numbers, I'm going to put an 8. If I again press the plus sign is going to come out under the radical symbol. If I don't want it there, I have to again press the right arrow key. If they press the right arrow key once, it stays and allows it to come out. If I, by not being patient, press it twice, it stayed under. So notice I'm going to put in 5 to the 4th power. And if I hit the plus sign again, the plus sign is going to continue in the exponent. I'm going to undo here. I want that plus sign outside, so I'm going to hit the right arrow key again and hit the plus sign, and it should allow me to continue with my expression. So the right arrow key needs to be used for the fraction function, radicals, and exponential functions. That was the editor that allowed you to do text and number values. Okay, the fill in the blank items for the 8th grade test allow a negative sign. Okay, it will not allow you to put fraction. I was trying to put the fraction bar and it says invalid input. So if for some reason they're trying to enter something that isn't allowed, they will get an invalid input sign. So I'm going to kind of showcase some of these top features here. Over here, I've answered a number of questions already. The ones that are highlighted yellow, I have not answered. The ones that don't have the dial anymore are questions I have answered. At the end of the test, I can come back and see which questions I've answered and which I have not. I can also bookmark a question. So I'm going to bookmark this particular question. Another feature here is the pointer. The pointer is like your cursor, allowing you to get to the space to respond, or it could also highlight. So if I click there, I can click and make that pink, or if I don't want it there, I can make it disappear by hitting that undo button. Please notice that there was capability of highlighting in blue or in pink. This highlighting feature is probably very useful for the language arts test. I think in the mathematics test, if students are reading and they at least highlight what's the question asking for, they can check to see whether their response is actually answering the question. Right, the next little function here is a protractor, and I'm going to pull the protractor here. Okay, the protractor will only be on the test if the question is asking for the protractor. They can grab it and slide it around. Okay, if they want to reorient it, they can spin it by grabbing the circle. They need to probably know how to use a regular protractor before they come to an online or electronic type calculator. Okay, the next button here is a centimeter ruler. In the 8th grade test, they'll have two little rulers up there. They'll have an 1/8-inch ruler and a centimeter ruler. So in this case, it's showcasing the centimeter ruler. The orientation feature works the same for this. To measure something that is vertical, they just grab the circle. The next function here is the answer eliminator, and I have an answer. I know that couldn't possibly be the answer, so I can exit. Some kids, Xing might be a distractor. For others, it might help to focus them. Click it again and it goes away. And the next feature, hotspot. Okay, so right now, this hotspot has a bunch of little blue boxes. Sometimes the hotspot will have nothing but a number line. So students have to be careful of that. If they see a number line with nothing on it, they might not even answer the question because they don't even know that they can touch it. In this case, root of 14 is, okay, so they click it. If they want to move it around, they click it any place else and it will move to the value. But they can't take it off totally. Once they begin putting an answer in, there's no way to take the answer away. The only way I can move it is by clicking someplace else to move the response. This next question is a matrix question. Students need to know rows and columns. In this case, all they're doing is answering one cell per column. Here, linear, 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 nonlinear, nonlinear, nonlinear. So they've answered one in each column. Some questions will ask them to respond one answer per row. And if students don't know the difference between a row and a column, it might confuse them. They might not know what to do. That's certainly vocabulary that needs to be reviewed with students. Let me show you a sample of that. Okay, here's a sample of hotspots that were different from the kind of hotspots that we've seen. The hotspot on the left-hand side, they just had to click on that bar where the light blue was, and it makes it dark blue. In this case, they would have clicked activate a hotspot. Okay, here's a hotspot, and again, this may or may not appear in the 8th grade test, but if they have an area that they need to highlight, they would click on the box to unhighlight it. There may be some questions that look like this, be multiple select or even multiple choice, where in order to answer, they have to click on the box and the box will turn dark. So that might be a feature that is on the 8th grade test. So here's a drag and drop sample that students need to drag and drop multiple times. In this case, they needed to drag that X symbol to each of these lengths to make their bar graph. If kids don't know that they can drag and drop multiple times, they may think, okay, I'm going to drag it and drop it, and that's it. But in this case, they needed to drag and drop several times. Okay, back to the question. I'm going to bookmark this one just so we can see later on. You'll notice that there's two drop downs. They may or may not have the same choices in the drop downs. So in this case, they need to answer both drop downs. They know one answer and not both. I would suggest answer the one they know and guess on the one they don't. It will not be considered complete unless both choices have been selected. Here's some sample that will allow them 2 drop downs in part A and 2 drop downs in part B. The next one is a line graph item. And in this line graph item, students may again be a little confused because here they have a grid. They need to know that in this particular, they can click. Once they click again, it will create a line. If they move their next point, the line will pivot with that first choice. If I change that first choice, my pivot becomes my second dial. So as I move around, I take both of them off by clicking and start fresh. So again, it's a special hotspot kind of question. The next question is a bar graph. What's important about this bar graph is that it does not default to 0. In this case, it's defaulting to 3. In this case, it's 6, so they just drag it over to where they need to drag it. And a nice feature about this is that label and the value is going to be inside that little square, so they know exactly where they're going. Always look at the scale down here, because the scale will change according to the question. They move back and forth wherever they need to be, but please notice it does not default to 0. If they want 0, they need to know that they need to drag all the way back to indicate 0. Since I have this feature open, I'm going to come over here to this guest profile and talk about the items that are on that guest profile. Okay, there are 4 little toggle downs. The first I'm going to talk about is the enable the magnifier. So if you notice, here's a little magnifying box. If a kid has some visual issues, they can come across here and read using the magnifier. This magnifier will not magnify the calculator. I'm going to come over here and deselect that. To turn it off, I just click it and it goes away. Another feature here is the line reader, and this might be more appropriate for the language arts test. I get my whole question in the frame. As I move down, it will move down line by line as the student is reading. Some students may be used to using a 3x5 card or something to read in that manner, so this allows that. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go all the way back to question 1 so that I can show this feature here. This next feature, answer masking. So right now you notice that all my questions, I can see them. If I hit answer masking, it closes up everything. So for kids who need focus, read the question, read the possible response one at a time, click down until they have them all. They can also use it as an eliminator. So this masker will mask every single choice, and they have to unmask to read each choice. So I'm going to disable that, and there's 2 more features. One feature is a background changer, and kids love to play with it when you go to practice. If I click that, I get a black background with white lettering. If a student that you know has some depth perception problems, changing the background might help them to see the question better. You know your students and you know which might need this extra. And then the top one is default, so you can click back to default. You know your students best, so you know what would work for them. Okay, the very last one down here, sign out of TestNav, a feature that you probably don't want to share with students because it might invalidate their test. Sometimes an emergency comes up, so you can sign out temporarily, but I think your test administrator will have given you those kinds of instructions for an emergency basis. These features, they're important for you to know as a teacher. Come back over here to... We were on question 21. Okay, the last one we did was the bar graph. The next one is a histogram question. Again, careful with the default. It does not default to 0. It's defaulting right now to 1. So if I want them all to 0, I can set them all to 0. So in this case, what they're going to be doing is getting all the values between 0 and 9. And let's just say, for example, there were 4. I'm just going to randomly move them to whatever the answer could be. Okay, but I do know that in the 50 to 59 range, there's none. So I need to be able to know that I can pull it back to 0. In this case, it defaulted to, I believe it was 0.5. Originally, the question had all the bars here. Okay, and since all the bars were in the same place, I might think, oh, that's my 0 point. Kids need to know that that wasn't. Okay, the next kind of question is called an interactive number line. There's nothing here right now. Okay, the interactive number line allows you to graph an equation on the number line. If I click it, it starts me at 0. I can stretch this to wherever I need it. This is going to be values that are greater than -1 but less than 2. Suppose I change my mind, I'm not sure, to remove it. This little remove function came open once I actually put something on the number line. So if I click this one, again, it starts at 0 And in this case, it was all values that are greater than or equal to 0. Remove it, and that remove function disappears. The next one is systems of equations. They get a blank grid, and they're going to graph linear equations. So in order to graph the line S, which is represented here, I know that I have to have this active. If I want to graph line T, the line T function has to be active. Point P will be obviously the point of intersection, but the line S was, for example, -3, and then I'm going to go up 1 over 3, and the next one was up at 5, and then down 1, right 1. I did something kids would probably do. Okay, -3, and then up 1 over 3 was my first one, correct? Now, if I want to go to the line, the second one, I have to activate my T, which I didn't do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then down 1, right 1. For my second one. So now my point of intersection has to be identified. There are 3 parts to this question, so the expectation for response will be all 3. They will have to come over here, point P, and actually identify point P in order to get all the points that might be possible on this particular test. Please notice that the color here corresponds to the activation of the function. Line S, line T was purple, and the point P was the turquoise color. This is a feature that didn't come out in any of the other grade bands. It's just asking them to kind of toy with this. So the question might ask them to reflect across the x-axis, across the y-axis. I'm going to 1, 2 over. Maybe I'm going to reflect it across the y-axis. So I come down here, 8 over here. And then I'm going to come back to here. Notice down here there's a close the shape button. In order to get from the last point they entered to the first point they entered, they hit the close shape, and it will close it up and color it in. That's what they want the students to do, is just to play with it. There was no question in this particular sample. It was just practice with plotting points. But I think the most important feature here is that they need to know that they need to hit the close shape button in order to finish off what they're doing. We're at the end of the session, reminding kids before they hit submit, they should come up here to review and check how many questions they may not have answered. They didn't answer 7 questions and they have 1 bookmark. Okay, I need to go back to answer question 3, or I can just come here to 3 and it'll automatically give them question 3. There's my bookmark. Maybe I answered question 14, but I wasn't sure, or maybe for whatever reason, I bookmarked it. I can come back to it to check it. It's a feature that I would certainly have kids know about, because you don't want them to submit their test without having had all the answers. I'm going to come back here to the handout. There's the site where you get to the tutorials, including the editor tutorials. Back forward buttons, they need to know about the review button. They need to know about the bookmark. The allowable calculators for 8th grade is a scientific calculator. There will be a button that looks just like this across the top screen that will only be there when a calculator is allowed. If they see this little thing, then a calculator will be allowed. They press it, and this is the calculator they get, a scientific calculator. Please keep in mind that they can have a handheld calculator as long as at the 8th grade level it's scientific. If you have kids on IEP who have in their IEP that they can use the calculator for non-calculator questions, it has to be in their IEP, and right now it's probably too late to get that accommodation for students. So it's something that for next year, if you know students may need this, get it put into their IEP already. For those kids who are on accommodation, they may not be real comfortable with a scientific, so they can bring a scientific and they can also bring a 4 function, but they have to have it in their IEP. There was the pointer function with the highlighting, the answer eliminator, the protractor, 1/8 and centimeter rulers for 8th grade, all the little features of the profile icon. Multiple choice questions, not multiple select. Keep in mind they are squares, but for the 8th grade on up, 1 or more answers are possible. Usually 2, but we saw a case where even though it said select all that apply, there was only one choice that applied, so they only had 1 answer. In the 8th grade test, the equation editor, kids need to know that they can click on that button and more features pop up. To close it, they just click on the button and it'll get back to the original that's displayed. Open response, originally they have this box, and this box. Usually it's open like this. Okay, but in the event that everything is closed up, they need to know that they click on it to open up the features. If they click on it again, the wording will stay there, but the features go away. So then I clicked on relational. So here's all the relational symbols: less than, greater than, similar, approximately, equal to. Then I clicked it and it closed it down, and I opened up the geometry one. So here's the geometry features that are available. Kids see this, they can know that it means parallel lines without having to write the whole word parallel, perpendicular, etc. You can use the keyboard icons for teaching kids about symbols. Next one is that fraction entry. Please remember the operator symbol stays in the denominator unless you hit the right arrow key, and I highlight it right here, right arrow key, to continue the expression or the equation. And it also applies to radicals, and it applies to the exponential functions. If you're still in the exponential or still in the denominator, that gray bar is still going to be there. If once I hit that right arrow key, that bar disappeared and it moved to the position where the next entry would apply. To get to the equation tutorial, you can click on that link, fill in the blank. Keep in mind, negative numbers can be entered for the 8th grade test. Hotspots, different kinds of hotspots, and I showed you some extra that may come up. Oftentimes, kids don't even know that they can click and something appears. Okay, so they may not have answered a question because they didn't know what would happen. They didn't click around. Okay, a matrix question, and this one is similar to the one that was in the tutorial. Students should absolutely know about columns and rows, because some questions will specifically say pick one in each column, pick one in each row. This question said select one in each column. So they need to know that that's a column, that there's an expectation that there's going to be one answer in each of these columns. And the instructions will say that. Drop downs, again, no score unless they answer all the drop downs. The line graph items are a special hotspot. So they click on one and then they click on another place, and it'll automatically draw the line between those two values. Bar graph and histogram, the important thing is it doesn't default to 0. The interactive number line, remember it was undo feature, the remove button, they have to have activated something to begin with. Systems of equations, the important thing there is that in order to graph the line, they need to activate, the A, B, whatever colored box. For asking them to plot the point, they may have the two lines on there and not think anything about the point. If it's asking for the point, they actually have to go in and put the point in, or the question will not be complete. The graphing polygons, again, the 8th grade test is the only place I saw this particular question. And important thing there is that they have to hit the close shape button in order to complete the drawing. Gotten to their end of the test, remind them to hit the review, check to see if they have questions unanswered or questions that they may have bookmarked. Here's a question that was not represented in the tutorial. The coordinate plane items, special hotspots to graph a point or points on a grid. I've put opportunities for practice. So keep in mind, to get to the 2016 practice items, all you do is click on that. To get to the 2016 release items, here's the link. Let me make it, it didn't make it active. I'll go back and fix that before. Oh, there it is. The difference between the practice items and the release items. The practice items came out in about September, and PARCC is just saying these are items that you can practice and they are interactive. So when you go to that site, kids can actually practice drag and drop, edit your questions. The release items are items that were actually on a test last spring for PARCC. These items will be static. All they're going to be doing is showing you the question. There is no interaction to the release items. In 2015, PARCC also released EOY and PBA release items from the prior tests. The release items are on this release site, and the practice items are on the MC² website. And the reason those are there is the practice items for 2015 are not available on the PARCC website anymore. They've repopulated it with the 2016 practice items, so the 2015 items disappeared. They are available on the MC² website. Here's the pathway to get to them. The reason they are on the website is because MC² used those practice items to help people do the thinking protocol, which is a protocol where students have the question, they think alone, answer the question alone. Then they buddy up with a partner and they share how they did on that particular question. Then it'll move to whole group discussion about that question. It's good for metacognition and helping kids think about how they're thinking about the problem. So again, we'll look at these in just a minute on the MC Squared website. So down below is all the opportunities for them to practice. If you want them to practice, for example, drag and drop, they can go to the practice tests, and Unit 1, Question 1, Unit 4, Question 9 will get them practice with drag and drop. There were 2 release items for drag and drop from the release test. Again, remember, those are static. They can have them or see them, but they can't practice them. Okay, the basic editor, there weren't any 8th grade questions on the basic editor, either in the release or the practice. In the open response editor, there were 7 practice questions for open response in the practice sections and 3 that they can look at in the review area. Fill in the blank, hotspot questions, there was 1. Matrix questions, there was several. Drop-down menus, again, several for the 8th grade. Line graph items, bar graph, number line, interactive number lines, there was none. Systems of equations, there were none available for practice or for the release item test. Graphing polygons, there were none. There were several coordinate plane items. There were three opportunities to practice that in the 8th grade practice test. At the very bottom, it says student work anchor papers. When we go to the 2016 site, you will see some what are called anchor papers, and they are actual student release questions from the 2016 test that was taken last spring, showing how students responded, what score they got. And so let me come up here and we'll go to that area. At that same original website that's at the top of your handout, you come to this bar and test preparation. I'm going to hit here practice tests, and up will come what's open right now. I come down to 8th grade and notice there are 3 different sections of the 8th grade test. I might use for practice having kids, if they're in a lab, make some kind of an answer sheet so that they answer on the computer, but they also answer in your answer sheet. And that way you can come down here and use the answer key that's available here for kids to actually check whether they're answering correct. So here's the key that will tell you how they should have responded to all the practice questions. Notice right there, that was that one where they're plotting points. Unit 2, and then there will be the Unit 2 answers. You want to see whether kids are really getting the answers correct or not, you might put together some kind of an answer sheet. Okay, so this is the actual grade 8 practice test for Unit 1. This one, first question was a drag and drop. Second question, fill in the blank. Just come across, here's one of those where they have to decide whether it's increasing, decreasing, or neither. In this case, they're going to have 1 answer per row because it has to either be increasing, decreasing, or neither for each row, but one of them was columns only, and this one is 1 in each row. So here is one of those questions where if I just saw that number line as a student, I might not know what to do. I don't know that I can actually click on a spot to say, okay, so they're giving me even a wider area on this one. So I know square root of 14 is about 3.7. That would be my answer, and then I could move on. But it opened up an extra area for them between the 3.5 and the 4 area to be able to respond even more accurately, more precisely. Okay, so multiple choice questions. These are all the kinds of questions students might practice with. Another dial question, drag and drop, multiple choice. This one was select each correct answer, and again, remember, it's going to be square because there could be more than one answer, but it could only be one answer. Okay, drag downs. Here's that one where they select a point on the coordinate plane to plot a point that may be given, and they need to know that they can just activate a point. Another multiple select. Here's another one of those that they can practice activating and graphing end of test. So they come over here, come to the review, check out. In this case, I didn't answer 15 questions. Come over here to the release items. Okay, so to get to the release items, I put the website on the handout. So you come over here to the assessment, come down here to PARCC release items, click there. As I scroll down, I'll get the search engine. Okay, I put into the search engine 2016 and math, and I wanted grade 8. So I come over here. I have the items that were released from last spring's test. I have a key to make sure that I'm going to verify the answers if in case the teacher wants to use them without having to do each question separately. Here are the student response pages. And again, for this grade level, there weren't very many. In this case, it's a question that was on the test. Okay, there's the question, and then there's the rubric. And then down I come to actual student work. Okay, so this is how a student entered their response to this question, and this student scored 3 points, and I believe it was worth 3 points. So they got all the points possible by answering exactly what's in the box. So you can use these as instructional tools for yourself to see what the expectation for responses is. You could also use them for exemplars to let kids see what the expectations for an answer. His response for the exact same question garnered him 3 points. This student got 2 points. Remember, he's being scored against the original rubric. So for you, you can look at what he responded and see what he didn't do in order to lose that 1 point. Just keep scrolling down. This kid responded, he got 0 points. However he responded, he did not meet the criteria in the rubric. Teachable moment for the student and also for the instructor to see, well, the kid's responding, but apparently his response doesn't make sense according to the rubric. There were only 3 at the 8th grade level released. 3 complete samples with multiple student works connected to them. This is where you get the release items. The last place I want to take you to is to the MC Squared website so that you can see where to get those practice questions that are no longer available on the website. Okay, so here's the MC Squared website. I can go down here to where it says standards-based resources. I click there and up opens another little drop down where it says MC Squared PARCC resources. I can click there and I can get the most current practice ones, 1 question per page, which would be preparing for the 2017. Those practice questions are the ones that kids can do and do interactive so that they could use the thinking protocol on them. Preparing for spring 2015 is going to get you all the practice questions, both PBA and performance-based questions and EOY end-of-year questions. October of 2014, those were released. There's a lot of PARCC information. There's some PARCC webinars available on this website also. So if you go all the way down to the bottom, by grade level, you can get EOY's practice items. And then if I go up a little bit, you can get the PBA ones, the performance-based ones. And these are also available in Spanish. So these are performance-based questions that were practice questions that were released that second year of PARCC. So these are all available on the website. Thank you for attending.